soon, one of which is a songwriting program, which is going to, again, hone in on that song. The sister, initiative to Control is going to be released, which is for labels and those working in the label space. The National Live Music Office to really start to unify what's happening at that level. We're pretty lucky. I think, you can... I feel like a bit of a Pollyanna today, but you can look at all the things that, aren't great, or you can complain about things, but I think when we've had a lot of experience with a lot of different music industries internationally and what's on offer and what initiatives are running, and I do think there's a lot here, and I don't think it's simple enough to sit back and say there's nothing or we can't get access to that information. And I think for a lot of artists, the last thing they want to do is think of it as a business, and their eyes glaze over, and I just want to make music, man, but you just got to kind of look at it now. You've got to be aware of what you're doing, and if you're going to find partners and pay them to do that, you want to really make sure that they're doing the right thing by you. So I think, it's healthy and it's really encouraging.
What are the common mistakes, Michael, that young bands and artists make when they're getting started? I know in the past some artists will sign to a small little label who makes all sorts of promises to them and they're committed to a bad deal. What are some of the traps for young players?
There's still a lot of that going on, but we're finding less and less of it. The biggest mistake that you could make now would be to sign a worldwide deal with somebody, basically. With one of the big multinationals to sign a worldwide deal. It really isn't necessary anymore. One of the reasons we're having success, and I know that other managers are doing the same, and is that building teams in each territories, having a team of people in America, having a team of people on the ground, radio pluggers, publicists, agents, etc., to build your act in each market. And I think, to do a big major worldwide deal now is fraught with danger, and you really need to know what you're doing to do those deals where you can hold on to Australia and New Zealand. And let's face it, more and more of the acts are releasing their music independently here. And I've got to tell you, the amount of money they make out of those sales is not small, and it is actually financing the rest of the world, the touring, the other releases, employing people on the ground in other countries. So, my attitude is you do it yourself, and if you find a partner in America or in the Northern Hemisphere who wants to do it and they'll set it up right at a major level, fine. Otherwise, you can do it yourselves. That's the new Lime Cordial EP we're releasing direct into America ourselves early next year. Because we're learning about America. Everything we do in America now, we're learning new stuff every day. And, you've just got to be aware. And our doors are open. We talk to a lot of young acts who've been offered different deals. We're always there to give them suggestions, as I'm sure Sounds Australia are as well. And that's what it's all about. What I really like about our industry is that we're all open with each other pretty much these days. When Gudinski and I were partners, we were still friends, but partners back in the 70s and 80s, and the early 90s, I'm not going to tell you which bands or which managers they were, but you can work it out yourself. They were pretty big bands at the time. And we'd follow these managers around the world. There were two big bands, one in the late 70s and one in the 80s to 90s. And we'd follow these managers around the world, and you'd go into Paul Russell, the head of Sony in London, and he'd say, I walked in one day and he said to me, what do you think of this band? I said, they're great. He said, so-and-so was just here and told me they're a piece of shit. And everywhere we went, these two managers, whenever they were asked about Australian bands, were putting shit on them and putting them down. And Michael Gudinski and I were flabbergasted because we've never been like that. And even today, I get asked about bands I've never heard of. They're great, mate. You should have a good look at them. And that's what I'm enjoying about right now. For an old bloke like me, to be able to be part of what's going on right now is very, very exciting.
Michael, what about a band? I just wonder how much snobbishness, though, still exists in the music business. You've got a band like Shepherd that plays unashamedly feel-good pop music. They do it so well, and they're reaping the rewards of it. But do parts of the industry still look down their nose at that type of
I
music?
reckon they'd sound great on Triple J.
Didn't Triple J unearth? Is that right? No, they didn't. Okay.
Chuggy did.
But I mean, I suppose that's one of the questions
Look,
about the type
one
of
of the
music
things
that you...
people forget is pop is a shortened derivative of popular music. Now, you know, it's ridiculous that this word fuck... Oops, sorry about that, ABC. This word pop...
You were doing so well.
Oh, yeah, I was doing it. I'm getting excited now. So
He's going to stand up.
takes a bit to get me excited. This word pop is a very destructive word. You know, I'll sit here right now and say Boy and Bear have sold 250,000 albums. That's not pop music.
But there's,
Right.
there's a fine line, isn't there, Nick? Because
A very fine line.
indie pop is really big, and the Jays plays plenty of this indie. And there's a point over which it becomes mainstream pop, indie pop.
Yeah,
You're sort of making a call as tastemakers on that at Triple J, are you?
as tastemakers, but the lines are so blurred nowadays. And I agree with Chuggy. Pop's not a dirty word. I actually like a lot of pop, but it has its place. And a lot of the time, that place may not be at Triple J. But we'll play tracks which you'll also hear, you know, a few months later, 6 months later down on commercial radio stations, because it does cross those lines.
Definitely.
It just angers me that a lot of the commercial stations where there is an incredible audience that is after that sort of thing doesn't take the risks as of yet to jump on acts like that. So yeah, there is blurred lines, and it comes down to what we realise our listener will want to hear, and their tastes change over time. Geez, you know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you wouldn't expect Triple J to be playing as much hip-hop and dance music as we do nowadays. But the demographics have changed, and now they really want to hear some great new glitchy electro.
Well, I would have thought the hardest music to get on the radio at the moment is actually rock music, actually.
Would you play Powderfinger now if they came out now? I mean, that's an interesting...
Well, Powderfinger's, you know, a great Australian band with an incredible history, but it doesn't hit that 18 to 24 demographic, which Triple J is. And
But
it'll
you
be...
guys were still playing, were still supporting new Powderfinger music, even as it had crossed over, and even as, you know, they were getting huge amounts of commercial airplay.
This is a conversation that older people like myself have with our people of my age group, Andy, about, you know, what's happened to rock music. You're a band that for 20 years has played rock music with a bit of a...
Still do.
Yeah. Still do it very well.
And
What do you make of the, you know, rock is dead
Is it?
sort of talk around the traps?
Well, look, just because I'm in a rock band doesn't mean I don't appreciate well-made pop music. You know, my musical taste is very broad, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, things ebb and flow. I remember in the mid-'90s, you know, rock was dead. Someone said that, fuck knows who. And then, sorry.
It wasn't me.
And then, you know, bang, out of the blocks comes, you know, the Vines and Jet, worldwide success, come back into Australia. Everyone's very impressed with a band that's huge on the cover of the NME. And all of a sudden, you know, someone turns around to you and I go, oh, you guys are classics. It's like, well, 2 years ago or a year ago, rock was dead and we were, you know, in the rubbish bin. So, and that just happens. You know?
I don't think rock is dead by far. I think there's some incredible rock albums which are coming out at the moment. You know, Brisbane's Vance Soho, who released an album last week, is an incredible album. You look at some of the real heavy acts, they're huge and they'll continue to be huge, but just the spotlight shifts to different genres.
Sure.
Nothing's ever dying.
And I think it's where, you know, to say rock is dead, it's not dead everywhere. And I think the idea of all these different countries and markets, and certainly I think a lot of the Asian territories, there's not the same definitions. There's certainly not the same fashion sense around indie versus alternate versus, you know, subgenre. We had
I'm glad you brought up Asia, actually, and perhaps you'll talk a bit about this, about the opportunities, as Asia is this vastly expanding market. The middle class wealth is growing. They're becoming really a huge new market opportunity for Australian musicians, aren't they?
Yeah,
Particularly
absolutely.
for touring.
Yeah, and we had a lineup at the Aussie Barbecue in Mumbai last year that was Carnival, Shepherd, Ginger Safari, the Aston Shuffle, and Big Scary. Now that's a pretty good cross-section of diverse talent, one from each state, that you probably aren't going to put Shepherd, the Aston Shuffle and Carnival on a bill together anytime soon. But that audience embraced every single one of those acts. And I'll tell you what, by the end of the tour, a lot of those Aston Shuffle guys and Ginger Safari were singing Let Me Down Easy. That song got under everyone's skin, and I don't think those, whether it's pretensions or cliques or all of that just gets thrown out the window. I think you're discovering a new market. The middle class and the hungriness for new music in those countries is absolutely
I mean,
mind-blowing.
We have an office in Singapore. We started the Laneway Festival there 3 years ago. We went from 3,500 to 9,500 this year. We've taken, obviously, a few Australian bands in through there. We are looking to take more and more Australian bands into Asia. Shepherd are top 5 in Thailand. And certainly I know Artist Voice have opened an office there. There's more Future, God bless them, have a festival in Malaysia. There's more and more happening there. Just on the subject of rock, 7 weeks ago I drove 2 hours from Berlin into the middle of nowhere in Poland and went to a festival that's been going for 19 years called the Polish Woodstock. 3 days of heavy rock and roll, 500,000 people. It was amazing and just blown away. All the money goes towards children, medicine, hospitals and healthcare in Poland, and we fell in love with it, and we're going to pick 2 Australian heavy rock bands and take them there next year. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
It was like unbelievable. And there's a lot of festivals like that all over the world. Rock is certainly not dead. I mean, just ask AJ Madar, Australia's #1 music power broker, and about Soundwave. He'll tell you all about it.
We're running out of time. Now, Nick?
I was just going to say, and also I think the way that people consume music genre-wise is completely different. You may not be a rock head, a hip-hop head or anything like that. You are someone that likes music across the board. You know, 10 years ago you'd have someone call up and request a track and they'd be going down a line. Nowadays, you know, you'll get Chook from Dolby will call up and go, can you play the new Parkway Drive song? Oh, no, because we just played it. Oh, okay. Can you play the new Flume song then? So, you know, it crosses genres.
Millie, can I ask you, Sounds Australia is doing a fine job putting Australian music out there internationally. You are, of course, government funded, and the government has now changed in Australia. Tell us about the important role that you think government should play and what future you have in terms of assuring that that government funding will continue.
Wow. We're quietly confident. I think the fact that the initiatives that are currently being funded have been around for a little while now and hopefully are showing the dividends means that they're not going to be taken away anytime soon. And I also don't think we're talking about the kind of money that probably really, you know, is part of those bigger discussions. What I'd probably like to point out is that the people we work with are the bureaucrats that are going to be around no matter what government's there, and I think they're the ones that have really started to take a significant interest in contemporary music, and I think them championing our cause is probably, hopefully, what's going to save us. But as I mentioned before, there's about 4 or 5 different initiatives that were announced just before the election. They've been confirmed, and we're going to hear about them pretty soon. And I just think it is what it is. We can't sit around and think all doom and gloom. I think there's opportunities in a change, and we want to just embrace them. I think it's about the people that are working within that environment, and I think there's some really strong relationships there. And I think what's probably more important is that the Australian music industry is working together. So previously, where you had the publishers and the labels possibly at different sides of an argument in the live sector, I think we're talking more around the same issues. The issues of the ISPs, the national broadband, those opportunities. Certainly export, we can all unify. And I think the more we have a common voice and aren't fighting amongst ourselves in the sandpit, the better we're going to have with government. I think
Okay.
sorry.
So I'm going to have to wrap it, I'm
That's
afraid. But look, will you please thank our terrific panel of guests, Michael Chugg, Nick Finlay, Andy Kent, Kathy McCabe and Millie Milgate.